This episode is brought to you by LifeLock. When you visit the doctor, you probably hand over your insurance, your ID, and contact details. It's just one of the many places that has your personal info. And if any of them accidentally expose it, you could be at risk for identity theft. LifeLock monitors millions of data points a second. If you become a victim, they'll fix it, guaranteed, or your money back. Save up to 40% your first year at lifelock.com/podcast. Terms apply.
Life is a workout, and Smoothie King is here to help you power through. Whether you're grinding out bicep curls or muscling the couch across the living room, crushing morning miles, or sprinting through back-to-back meetings, Smoothie King has fuel to help you maximize your workouts, own your recovery, and elevate your game. Give your body the energy, protein, and power it needs with a lineup of delicious smoothies made to help you conquer your goals. Only at Smoothie King.
You're listening to 1865, the Nottingham Forest podcast with Rich Ferraro.
Hello and welcome to the 1865 Match Report, the first one of a new season. I'm your host, Rich Ferraro, and I'm joined by Baz as we talk about and celebrate Forest's 3-1 victory over Brentford. Yes, 3-1, and it was a match where we knew that team news would be fairly standard, and it was exactly what we expected, wasn't it, Baz?
The only change really being from our expected first team from last season will be the replacement of Anthony Elanga with Dan Ndoye, which is pretty much what you'd come to expect, really.
Absolutely. So we had Sells in goal, we had Aina at right back and Williams at left back, with the two M's in the middle. And in the holding positions, we had Sangaré and Anderson behind Ndoye on the right, Hudson-Odoi on the left, and Gibbs-White supporting Chris Wood. And you know what? If you're going to start a new season in a match that's potentially a bit of a banana skin, because it's Brentford, isn't it? We know that they've got problems, but still, it's Brentford. Well, taking an early lead is exactly what you want, isn't it?
Yeah, and actually, before we get to that, so the thing you'd noticed rather was during the warm-up, Brentford were there practicing corners, and I was like, yeah, their new manager's their old set-piece coach, isn't he? So yeah. I wonder what sort of tactics they're going to use.
Yeah.
But the goal came from us getting a corner. Absolutely.
So I don't know if he technically gets the assist, but Elliot Anderson... It's a good old-fashioned corner, really. Yeah. Elliot Anderson booted it into the box. Chris Wood tried to get a header on it. It bounced down, and then he basically toe-poked the rebound, didn't he?
Well, so actually, I had a very, very quick look at the highlights video, and firstly, Chris Wood had 3 Brentford defenders on him. And it looked from what I could see of it, he was like falling backwards as he headed it. So he was like almost falling backwards as it came back down, and he sort of half volleyed it.
So what you're saying is I'm not giving him enough credit.
Yeah, but I mean, from what's his name, Keith Andrews' point of view, for a set piece coach to have 3 defenders on one person and them still to score on their second attempt, is pretty damning.
Yeah, luckily that's not our problem. So then, not long after that, and what I'd say is that the first 20 minutes, Forest were absolutely in control, weren't they? They were dominant. Yeah. They were stroking the ball around nicely. And that very nearly led to what would have been a quite fabulous second goal when there was some lovely interplay between the midfielders, the wingers. I think even a couple of fullbacks got involved. And then Anderson had a bit of a snapshot at the end, which went just wide. And I was saying to you, and again, I might be doing people an injustice here. I was saying that's not something that's coached. That's down to natural instinct to the players and players with ability, because the little flicks and the movement is down to players understanding how football works.
Yeah, and Brentford were helping us. They the way they were set up, and well, to be honest, I didn't really understand what sort of type of football they were trying to play. They looked a bit lost.
I would agree with that. Yeah, I mean, tactically, it's all very well saying we're going to use set pieces, which Brentford have done very effectively for a year or two now. But in open play, yeah, there wasn't really any sign of personality or any kind of style, was there? Having said that, we did almost let them in, didn't we, when it was 1-0? And this was down to a misplaced pass a mistake by Morgan Gibbs-White and a misplaced pass, which led to Yahoo Yarmouk having an effort on goal from distance. It was about 20 yards. It had good power on it. It was going towards the bottom corner, and it was a good save from Sells because it was low down in the corner. So parried away, and then one that maybe you'd expect a keeper like Sells to save, but nonetheless he had to do it.
Yeah, and the other thing with that was we were just saying, like, we were on top for the first 20 minutes, like completely dominating the game, and it was like last season we used to have a 20-minute slump. It's going to come soon, and then that happened not long after. So it kind of was a little bit of a warning sign.
Yeah. And then there was another warning sign as well. So Ndoye was trying to cover in the right-back position, and Rico Henry did a really good slaloming run, went round him, cut the ball back, and I can't remember if it was Yarmouk, if it was Jensen, just inside the 18-yard box, poked it towards goal. Igor Thiago was there in the six-yard box. He tried to divert it in, and it was a really, really good last-minute block from Nico Williams, wasn't it? And, there were alarm bells ringing then, I think. I will say that Ndoye, he probably, that's something where you're getting to grips with the pace of the Premier League, I think.
Yeah. And actually, and in his favour, I think it was not long after that, there was a point where Gibbs-White picked the ball up sort of just outside the halfway line, crossed the halfway line, played the ball forwards, and Ndoye did this like arcing run from the right wing into the centre, just in front of their centre-backs, and that was not the sort of thing you'd have seen from Elanga.
Yeah, that's exactly what we said at the time, wasn't it?
And it didn't come to anything, but it was like a statement of intent that was actually quite nice to see.
And there's another moment where Ndoye got into the inside right channel, and just when it looked like he was going to get blocked by the fullback, he somehow managed to put the ball across. So yeah, he had a few dangerous moments, and of course that came to fruition because just when Forest was starting to turn it on again, they had that 20-minute slump, and had those dangerous hairy moments. But then Forest started to kind of switch on again a little bit, and the second goal when it came, I mean, I really love this goal.
Yeah.
I really love this goal because there's, again, some flicks and tricks and passing and movement in the build-up. But the thing that will take the headlines is that shimmy and cross. Out of nothing, Morgan Gibbs-White just shifted it to his left foot and put this cross floated ball in, and Ndoye read it brilliantly. He got ahead of Rico Henry, and it's easy to forget that Ndoye is actually, he's not a small guy, and he kind of did I don't know if it's a diving header, it's kind of more like a launching header, I suppose, but headed it across the goal, across Kelleher, into the far corner, and all of a sudden, Forest were 2-0 up, and I think that was probably a fair reflection of how the game was going, really.
Yeah. I mean, what we've kind of got, even though we did have a couple of hairy moments as well, I do think that we were by far the better side all the way through the first half, especially Sangaré and Anderson and Gibbs-White, because they just had control of the game. They were far superior to Brentford's midfield. They had vision and passes. Sangaré was in the right place at the right time to intercept every time they tried to launch an attack. Anderson was all over the place. He was both doing the defensive work and carrying the ball forwards and picking out passes. And then Gibbs-White was Gibbs-White, just skipping past players and picking out his passes as well. So it wasn't a surprise that we were 2-0 up. I think it was entirely deserved.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to add to that, you made the point. It was in the second half you made this point, but you could easily have said it at any point in the 90 minutes, which is how often have Forest actually controlled a midfield? I'm really struggling to think of a time that we've done it in recent memory.
No.
Because all the kind of moments of success and everything have come from fast breaks down the wings under Steve Cooper and under Nuno. And so to actually have that domination of midfield was really something that was quite new, quite interesting. And
the other thing to note as well is we were playing much higher up the pitch. We were pressing their back line in a way that we haven't seen since maybe the Championship.
Yeah, and funnily enough, actually, going back to that whole thing about after 20 minutes, Forest kind of took their foot off the gas or lost a bit of momentum at that point, and Brentford did have those couple of chances. I'm pretty certain that after that kind of 20 minutes-ish mark, that was pretty much the first time that Brentford were in our half. The entire first half of the first half was basically played in and around the Brentford third, I suppose, with pressure putting on them. So that was, again, really heartening to see. And what I will also say, and we will come back to it a little bit later, with that kind of midfield triangle of Sangaré at the base on the right-hand side, Anderson base at the left-hand side, and Gibbs-White in that floating position, is that the balance between the three and the way they covered for each other as well was really, really impressive. But we will talk about that a little bit later on. Another thing I want to mention, particularly in the first hour of the match, so especially in the first half, is that the Williams and Hudson-Ndoye combination on the left-hand side was frankly scaring the bejesus out of Brentford, wasn't it?
Their right back wasn't having a nightmare, but he was looking quite lost, and Williams basically decided, right, I'm going to play right up on sort of the what do you call it, the half space sort of inside,
whatever that means.
And with Hudson-Odoi just in front of him and a bit to the outside of him, so we had an extra body basically every time we broke down that side.
Yeah, and Keane Lewis-Potter, who has been a scourge of Forest occasionally in the past, he was playing on the right of a front three. And basically, I mean, I like Lewis-Potter, he's a good player, but Nico is, I mean, he's basically superhuman these days. And you could just see the difference in strength and power between, and Lewis-Potter could basically barely do anything against Nico. So, yeah, and the other thing worth pointing out, and I do need to say this before I forget. Mark Dennison, in our pre-season preview, he did say he thought that Callum Hudson-Odoi has something about him in pre-season, and he pointed out he's playing with his collar up. So he was turning them inside and out. And what was interesting is that, yes, he wanted to cut in on his right foot, but when that wasn't an option, he didn't give up. He'd either find Nico or Anderson in space around him, or a few times he did actually go down to the byline and try and put it across with his left foot. So that was heartening to see. Now, it's worth coming back to Anderson, because not long after we went 2-0 up, they put the board up for stoppage time at the end of the first half, and basically Brentford got themselves a little bit lost, didn't they, in the middle of the park. And
well, I mean, part of the thing when we're playing higher up the pitch, obviously the danger of doing that is that you open yourself up to a break, and it was kind of a very poor Brentford break where they didn't really know. They played it straight through from their back line straight through the middle, down the middle towards us, and then Anderson just like put in the tackle and a first time pass.
And what a first time pass! Like, you know, when you're playing a ball through the lines and you are trying to put someone through, there's a whole number of things that you have to consider. One is obviously direction, 2 is timing, and 3 is the pace and weight on the pass. And this was all perfectly done, bearing in mind it was just a spontaneous thing. Like, it would have been very easy for him to just get it wrong in some direction, but it worked perfectly. Chris Wood made the run at exactly the right time. Initially, I thought that's going to go to VAR for an offside check, but there was no hint that there was any controversy about it. And then we'd been saying in the first half, in contrast to the people behind us, actually, we'd been saying about how Kelleher doesn't really look all that as a number one, does he?
No.
Considering how highly rated he is. And you were particularly unimpressed with the way that Kelleher dealt with the one-on-one against Chris Wood.
He basically, it was almost like Chris Wood broke through. There was maybe 10 yards for him to run of open space, and Kelleher sort of just ran towards him and then sort of lay down in front of him.
Yeah.
So Chris Wood just had to take it round him.
For any cat owners, if you've had that moment where you walk into a room and the cat goes, "Look how cute I am," by lying on the floor, it reminded me a bit of that. And just like also the cats might try and tap your ankles as you walk past. That's what Kelleher's attempt at saving was like. So for a striker like Wood, it was bread and butter, wasn't it? Yeah. And so Forest went in at half-time, 3-0 to the good.
The 1865 Match Report.
This season, the game begins before the games begin. On August 26th, it's FanDuel Futures Day. 24 hours of deals on all your football season predictions. Futures Day is coming. Visit the FanDuel app to learn more and get your picks ready now. FanDuel, play your game. 21 plus and present in select states. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER.
You're listening to 1865, the Nottingham Forest podcast.
Okay, now in the second half, the first thing to note was that Brentford made a substitution which was a bit of a formation and tactical change. And in fairness to Andrews, obviously Forest, you're going to take your foot off the gas ever so slightly, aren't you, when you're 3-0 up at half-time. But in fairness to Keith Andrews, it did actually have an impact on how we played, didn't it? Because they took off they went from playing a 4-3-3 to playing a 4-2-3-1, which meant they had Shard on the left-hand side and Carvalho as a number 10 and Lewis Potter on the right-hand side. But it meant that those wide players were able to press our fullbacks much more than they did in the first half.
Yes, and it was especially with Sharda coming on, Ola Aina was doing much more defensive work. He didn't cross into their half quite as much, and he was putting in the tackles and putting in the headers. Yeah,
and in fairness, he didn't look particularly happy about it when he's having to defend that much. I also will point out though that Forest were still, very much the dominant team for the majority of this half, and Brentford's tactical change was a double-edged sword because it meant they were pressing our fullbacks more. But you were saying it actually reminded you a little bit about Forest in that first season back in the Premier League, where there was big gaps between the lines.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden they only had two holding midfielders, and they were getting they were given the runaround, weren't they? By again our triumvirate of Hudson-Ndoye with Hudson-Ndoye on the wings with Ndoye, but mainly Gibbs-White, Anderson, and Sangaré in the middle of the park.
Yeah, that point then when they changed their formation with our three midfielders completely and utterly dominated the game, like just totally controlled it. It was, as we said earlier, I can't think of the last time Forest have played like that. It was really, really good to see, and obviously it's because Brentford sort of played into our hands because they were chasing things.
Yeah,
and it made a difference because, as I said, Ola Aina was defending more. But it didn't matter because we just went through the centre instead of going up the wings.
Although, having said that, the big chance, the one that's going to get on Match of the Day 2 tonight, is the one that did come from going down the wings, basically, where it was Hudson-Ndoye going down the left-hand side, again, heading down to the byline, cutting it across with his left foot. And then Morgan Gibbs-White, I've not watched this back in the video. You kind of have quickly. Can you describe what motion Gibbs-White was doing there? Because it wasn't an overhead kick. It wasn't just a backheel flick. It was a bit of everything.
It was kind of an overhead kick because he sort of leapt onto his back, but rather than his foot going all the way over it didn't have to go very high. So
yeah.
But the ball, if it had gone in, it would have been outstanding.
Yeah, I mean, and bearing in mind that Richarlison scored a brilliant overhead kick yesterday, I think this would have been better, wouldn't it? It really would, because of the pace of it, because of the improvisation that was gone into it. And so, in a way...
Richarlison was like in acres of space, whereas Gibbs-White, was surrounded.
Yeah, and he knew as well that would have been one of the greatest goals he's ever scored if it had gone in. You could tell that. So as so often happens, things then, the heat turned down ever so slightly. Forest, however, was still really good in those midfield positions. With regards to goalmouth action, there wasn't a huge amount of it, though, was there? There's a moment where Sangaré, he had a decent effort, but it went over. There was another one from Gibbs-White, who I think, frankly, just wanted to score, but he got a bit overexcited, and it was more in danger of threatening the upper Trent end. The best effort was a snapshot from Hudson Ndoye, which was straight at Dan Keller's throat, but it was travelling. And we did say, I wouldn't have been surprised if Keller had ended up letting it through, actually, given the match he'd had. So those are the main chances for Forest. And let's talk about a couple of things. Number one, let's go straight on to the Brentford goal, because we've been saying it'll be so disappointing if we don't keep a clean sheet against these. And the reason I want to talk about the Brentford goal is because Forest had an appeal in the first half where Anderson took a free kick, which was basically kind of waist height. The Brentford players defending it. It hit his hand. I don't think there's any dispute about that. And I don't think he was waving his arm about. But I haven't seen a replay of it. Now, when we were in the car on the way home, the commentary from Colin Frey was saying, well, it couldn't be much more clear as a handball, but the VAR perspective wasn't really helping. And then when the penalty was given against Forest, and I had no problem with it because I thought someone's waving their arm about in there, and if you wave your arm about in the box and the ball hits it, you kind of deserve to concede a penalty. So firstly, it's an instinctive move, but it's careless to do as a professional footballer. But secondly, I've seen a couple of comments saying, you know what, it could easily have been 4 or 5-0 to Forest if the decisions had gone the other way. And bearing in mind that I think there's still a little bit of bitterness from Forest fans about Foamgate and the way the referees treat Brentford versus Forest. So I'm just throwing that out there, but I'm not going to say anything more. I'm going to defer to you.
Well, I mean, I don't know. Again, I've only seen very, very briefly on my phone. You can definitely see the Forest player, Sangaré, I think, is arm waving about, so you can't complain at that one. I couldn't really see from the earlier one. Yeah. What has actually, before, the reason that the attack happened that resulted in that was because Brentford had put Jordan Henderson on.
I was going to come back to that, and because I say we're going to talk about other substitutions, not just for Forest, but also for Brentford. So we will come back to that. What I will say is there was a very long VAR check for the penalty that was given against Forest. There wasn't as long a VAR check for the penalty that wasn't given in Forest's favour in the first half. Make of that what you will. I'm sure for many of you listeners, by the time you hear this, you will have gone over the video highlights in detail. There'll have been analysis on Match of the Day 2 on Sky everywhere. So it may even make Ref Watch, who knows. Either way, it's disappointing. Thiago put the penalty away with aplomb, and it was 3-1. And to be honest, as often happens in these situations, it did feel a little bit hairy. And part of that is down to the fact that we'd said in the first half, hadn't we, with Forest absolutely dominating the midfield, Brentford are really missing a Norgard type player. And I didn't realise that Henderson was on the bench. I assumed he wasn't able to, wasn't in the squad. Henderson came on. You can see what a difference it made having somebody with experience to kind of just dictate the tempo a little bit. And also, I think most importantly, I'm pretty certain he just said to his teammates, look, they're 3-0 up, right? The pressure is on them because there's no pressure on us. Either we roll over and die, or we can have a go at them, and let's just embrace it.
Yeah,
and you could see there was a definite difference in Brentford after Henderson came on.
Yeah, and we still were better in midfield, but we didn't have complete control of it. And Brentford's attacks, while still, apart from the penalty, they didn't really get any. They didn't really force anything out of ourselves at all. But they were attacking more.
Yeah.
Henderson coming on had made that difference. At least they had control of the ball a bit more.
And in the double sub where Henderson came on, they did revert back to a 4-3-3 again. So it meant that they realised obviously that there was a double-edged sword and that they'd lost complete control of midfield. So that was something that kind of evened it out ever so slightly. Now, as the match went on, funnily enough, in the post-match interview, Colin Frey did say to Nuno, it's like, yeah, but, you saw it out quite comfortably, and Nuno scoffed at that a little bit, didn't he? But honestly, there's only one team who's going to score more goals in the last sort of 5 minutes plus stoppage time, wasn't there? And Forest had made changes, so Morgan had come off, replaced by Yates, who's kind of floating around in a number 10 position. Jesus had come on for Wood. And who was the other substitution? Ndoye had come off and Jota Silva had come on. So in that respect, I think you and I were both thinking maybe give Ola a rest and maybe stick Abbott on at full back or something like that. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, certainly as we develop the squad and as especially with more matches, we need to take every opportunity we can to rest the key players, don't we?
Yeah. And let's say it's disappointing to have conceded a goal in a game where Brentford really didn't offer very much. And that's possibly the biggest negative you can take away from the performance, because actually when Henderson came on, it didn't look immediately threatening. It was not, as I said, Sells didn't really have much to do when he came on, but they were better, and we didn't really respond to the way that they'd improved. And that might be because of personnel and who we had on the bench and whatever. It might be because Nuno didn't want to go to a back five in his first home game of a new season, when he's trying to say we're playing on the front foot a bit more. Who knows why that is, but it was quite apparent that our biggest failure could well be ourselves this season.
Yeah. And so we will talk about that in a little bit more and a couple of other odds and ends around the match in just a second.
The 1865 Match Report.
Mamá, papá, mi cuerpo crece a un ritmo alarmante y la ropa que me compren ahora me quedará muy pequeña muy pronto. Pero su billetera no tiene que sufrir por la moda con los precios bajos de la vuelta a clases de Amazon. Amazon, gasta menos, sonríe más.
You're listening to 1865, the Nottingham Forest podcast.
Welcome back to part 3 of our match report. So we will come back to what you mentioned before the break, Baz, in terms of what this could mean for Forest as the season progresses. Just a few footnotes, I suppose. So before the game, before the kickoff, Forest took the time to introduce Omari Hutchinson and James McAtee. For squad number fans, they're going to be wearing 21 and 24 respectively. And I think that was a nice little thing, partly because obviously they were in Nottingham to have signed their contracts, but it's one of those things of like, it gives everyone a little boost, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So that was an interesting moment. The other thing we do need to talk about is the minute silence for Diogo Jota and Andre Silva, which was spoilt a little bit. And apparently this was down to a fan. I couldn't hear what was being said. Apparently it's down to a fan who was annoyed that Forest weren't acknowledging the passing of former skipper Terry Hennessy as part of that minute's silence. I think it's a legitimate gripe, but it's rubbed a few other people up the wrong way. So the quote of the day comes from, just as someone else shouted, "Have some respect," then someone else who might have been in A block said, "Shut up, you cocky twat." Which is how the minute's silence ended. Any thoughts on that?
You can't ruin someone else's minute silence like that.
Yeah, but actually thinking about it, it's a missed opportunity by the club. Yeah. They could have tied it in with Terry Hennessy. And then thinking about that squad and what that might look like, I think we can all agree it's brilliant to start the season with a win. Mm-hmm. It's one of those things, it's a sunny day, everyone's in good spirits. Brentford we knew was an eminently winnable match, but you still actually have to go out and win it. So scoring an early goal and going in at half-time 3-0 up is very, very good. First time we've won on opening day for 8 years. And I'm thinking back, I've not looked it up, I'm thinking that was under Montagnier when we beat Burton Albion 4-3 at a match which I was at. And do you want to know who played in central midfield for Forest that day? It was George Grant and Matty Cash.
Blimey.
Yeah, blimey indeed. Home match at the start of the season is a gift, isn't it? It's something that can really help set the tempo. And again, as usual, sellout crowd. The ground was looking resplendent. The fans were in red. There was a Forza display in the Trent End and at Mull of Kintyre time. So there's lots and lots of positives there. We're not going to win every match like that, though.
No, I think probably one of the biggest positives was, in terms of entertainment, the style of play that Forest put on for at least 60 minutes, 70 minutes was unlike anything we've seen for a couple of seasons at the very least, probably since the Championship. And as I say, the midfield domination was a joy to watch.
Yeah.
The other thing I would just like to mention is I'm pretty sure Mr. Marinakis enjoyed himself in the first half, as there were a couple of chants in his favour.
Yeah, so, it's 8 years since Mr. Marinakis got involved with the club, or just coming up to 8 years, and I don't think I've heard a Marinakis chant before, but the favourite one is... Marinakis hates the Tottenham, hates the Palace, but Forest are magic. So that's one that I think we'll hear certainly next week.
Yes.
So I want to, as you often do in these match reports, I also want to give a mention to the bloke next to you because of a couple of things. Number one, he did say, I can't believe we're all concerned about getting goals in pre-season. He said that at half-time, didn't he? And it's like, the Forest were just saving them up, weren't they? And the other thing in terms of conversation was that Morgan Gibbs-White was named as the man of the match by the sponsors. And I think they'll, again, anticipating what might happen on Match of the Day 2 tonight, I think there'll be a lot of people talking about him. There's a big story there, isn't there?
Yeah.
But the three of us in a row, like one said, yeah, Gibbs-White's my man of the match. I said it was Anderson and you said Sangaré, didn't you? And what a nice position that is to be in.
Yeah, definitely. Because you couldn't. I mean, Gibbs-White will get the headlines because of the story and because he's the attacking of the three. But you couldn't really put a cigarette paper between the three of them.
And crucially as well, especially as players like Angel Gomez have fallen out of favour. Like Henderson, Tuchel might like him, but he's not going to be an option for the World Cup. So I do think Anderson, if he keeps playing like this, he's going to have a real chance, probably more of a chance than Morgan, of making an impression at senior England level. And so that's one of the reasons. He's just so busy, isn't he? And but he does it with finesse. He sticks a foot in, he wins the ball, he G's up the team and the crowd. He's an all-round number 8 midfielder.
Yeah, he's got a bit of everything, which is great to see.
Okay, what do you reckon Nuno's next moves are going to be in terms of what he does with the team? Obviously, we don't know if we're going to sign Douglas Luiz or Rico Lewis. They're the two that are being talked about. Also, the striker whose name I can't pronounce from France. But assuming we've got the same personnel, add in the two who've just signed for next week, would you expect to see many changes for the Palace match?
Given that we don't have fullbacks, and given it's against Oliver Glasner, I wouldn't be surprised if we went, and it's away, I wouldn't be surprised if we went with a back five. Okay,
to kind of counter Palace playing with the kind of high wing backs and sort of three up front. Okay, interesting. And of course, the other variable there is, will Eberici Eze still be a Palace player at that point? Who knows? And of course, Palace, if I remember rightly, will have just recovered from a tricky Conference League playoff. Poor guys.
And then they'll in the back of their heads are going to be like, oh, we've got another of those coming up soon.
Absolutely. Anyway, we'll be back with our new feature, which is Yates's Espresso Bar, which will be with you in midweek. And then, of course, we will be back. We'll have a man at Selhurst Park, and we'll bring you a match report on that after the match next weekend. In the meantime, thank you so much for listening. Thank you to Baz, and come on, you Reds.
You've been listening to 1865, the Nottingham Forest podcast. If you like what you hear, please subscribe and leave us a review. It helps other listeners find our content.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
And Doug.
Limu and I always tell you to customize your car insurance and save hundreds with Liberty Mutual. But now, we want you to feel it. Cue the emu music, Limu. Save yourself money today. Increase your wealth. Customize and save, we say. That may have been too much feeling.
Only pay for what you need at libertymutual.com.
Liberty, 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 liberty.
Savings vary. Underwritten by Liberty Mutual Insurance Company and affiliates. Excludes Massachusetts.